Venezuela, which has the largest proven reserves of crude oil in the world, is right now under the thumb of US President Donald Trump. Preemption is a tool which only they are not empowered to use. Let me tell you, there was no mediation in Operation Sindoor. The only thing was the Pakistanis asking all its friends, US, China, Saudi Arabia, to somehow tell India to stop. Two big powers are trying to sort of, jostle with each other, saying that, actually it was my mediation that worked. Let me tell you, there was no mediation in Operation Sindoor. The Chinese do not lose a single opportunity of putting down the Japanese when it comes to crimes in World War II. Whether it is comfort women, whether it is, rape of Nanjing. It's not about getting the Kohinoor diamond back. It is what you did to us. And for that, you must apologize. It is very important for us to really decolonize our mindset. And that should start with the government itself first. The unfortunate part about it is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has gone blue in his face trying to talk about Atmanirbharta. I don't think the message has percolated down. Trade tariff thing is going to continue. India is keeping quiet, but India will definitely protect its own interests.
Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Hindustan Times and my name is Aisha Varma. On this segment of Point Blank, we take a look at the 5 buzzwords of 2025 and the ramifications for 2026 and beyond. Joining us is HT's executive editor, Shishir Gupta. Sir, namaskar. Sir, the first buzzword, preemption. What do you have to say about it?
Aisha, preemption actually is an ongoing buzzword because you see the US intervention in Venezuela where Nicolas Maduro was taken captive. And what you see actually is that might is right. And when you see the entire action and how the entire thing has taken place, you realize that it was a intelligence-led operation. It was a pinpointed operation. Somehow his security, I do not know, let the facts come out later. Somehow his security collapsed, or maybe they wanted the man to be, there are a whole lot of conspiracy theories going around. But the fact remains is that Venezuela, which has the largest proven reserves of crude oil in the world, is right now under the thumb of US President Donald Trump. US, the Anglo-Saxon community powers, they sort of, take a very dim view if somebody else all over the world does a preemption. But for them, the might is again right. And that is what has happened in Venezuela. The whole episode in Venezuela is not going to really impact India in a big way, though India has, has called for restraint and has called for, dialogue for the entire thing, because India hardly buys oil from Venezuela, right? The problem is going to come to countries like China, which does a whole lot of supplies worth nearly $15 billion a year from Venezuela. For Iran, which has been sort of, buying oil and maybe, selling it on high seas to get money to sort of, somehow circumvent the sanctions that have been placed on it. Now, what President Donald Trump is doing is that he is saying that, listen, China has been very active in Africa. It won't allow China in its own backyard, that is South America. So this is what is this preemption come down to. Now there is some activity in Iran. There are a lot of protests going on over there. And hardly any news is coming out, but whatever you see, and then you see the statement from President Donald Trump where he says that I'm locked and loaded. So what you see is the preemption word has been used particularly in Venezuela in the context of that, Venezuela was allowing, smuggling of fentanyl, smuggling of cocaine into US, mainland US, and causing a lot of harm. But what you see is a long-term strategy that is being played out by US. It has now, it has the control of Venezuela. It has the control of oil. It has pushed China into a corner over there. You must remember that the Chinese delegation had only left 1 hour before Maduro got captured. So what you're seeing is that, President Donald Trump's preemption is going to have widespread ramifications. First of all, it shows how defunct UN is. Second thing is that, it has basically made it very clear that, President Donald Trump will do what he has to do. Third thing, it also gives China a way out if it tries to co-opt Taiwan into its mainland. Because if President Donald Trump can do that to Venezuela, China can definitely do to Taiwan, because Taiwan happens to be, it calls it one of its states, and nobody has objected to it overtly. So you see a lot of things that are going to come out. It has a huge ramification for future and what happens. Second thing is, can Venezuela stabilize after this action that has taken place? Because Americans, if you remember in the past decade, have not been the best in stabilization. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, everywhere there is still chaos prevailing. So preemption is a very sexy word, but the fact remains is that preemption is only valid if you can stabilize the entire thing, if you can stabilize the country, if you can do better for that country. If things are going to go down the spiral, then it may not be such a great idea. But lastly, the West and the US need to realize that preemption is a tool which only they are not empowered to use. Suppose everybody starts to do the same thing, there'll be utter chaos.
So speaking of utter chaos, that brings us to our second buzzword of 2025, because there has been global conflict on multiple fronts. So the buzzword that we're talking about here is mediation.
See, mediation is a buzzword of 2025 and again is continuing because recently the Chinese foreign minister, Wang Yi, who's also the director of the Foreign Affairs Commission of the Communist Party of China, and a very senior leader, he hinted that China had mediated between India and Pakistan during Operation Sindoor. President Donald Trump has also said the same thing, saying that he mediated between India and Pakistan and stopped virtually a nuclear war. Now, the problem here is that, there is something called mediation. There is something called using the good offices. Now, I think what the Chinese foreign minister is saying is that the Pakistanis use the Chinese good offices to try and convince India to come to ceasefire. Well, fact remains is that nothing of that sort happened. It may have happened on the Pakistani side. It did not happen on the Indian side. Prime Minister Narendra Modi took no call from anybody who said that stop the war. What I also know is that people who tried to intervene, there were other people who were also interested. But the Ministry of External Affairs said that the right route is the DGMO route, and it is for the Pakistan DGMO to talk about ceasefire. So you talk to them. Here they have to do that. Similarly, when President Donald Trump talks about mediation, he essentially is saying when Pakistan begged for a ceasefire with the US. Okay? So there is this whole business of using good offices. I think the word is using good offices, and Pakistan use good offices. If you talk about mediation, then I think the person who should actually get the best prize for this is Qatar, because Qatar really mediated with Taliban. Qatar mediated with Hamas. Hamas was sitting over there. So Qatar can also say that, we mediated. Actually, it was using good offices. So I think somewhere down the line, the two big powers are trying to sort of, jostle with each other, saying that, actually, it was my mediation that worked. Let me tell you, there was no mediation in Operation Sindoor. The only thing was the Pakistanis asking all its friends, US, China, Saudi Arabia, to somehow tell India to stop. India was not listening. Till such time, it came through the Pakistan DGMO.
And so as we head into a new year, there is also a movement to always look at history, at the past, which is why we also look at our next buzzword, which is colonial mindset.
See, there is this saying that people who do not read history are forced to repeat it. And the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been talking about, decolonizing the Indian mindset for long, and he wants to do it in the next 10 years. His 5 prands, which he talked about when India turned 75, was one of them was, getting this colonial mindset out. And today he's written an article in Hindustan Times where he talks about, about Somnath temple, which was raided by Mahmud of Ghazni, 1,000 years ago on the same day today. So the problem is with us is that Indians definitely do not read history seriously, because they have a very, somehow they have a pretty low esteem about their past, and that's how it happens. Because I'll tell you a very specific thing. When the Chinese do not lose a single opportunity of putting down the Japanese when it comes to crimes in World War II, whether it is comfort women, whether it is, rape of Nanjing, whatever it is. They repeat time and again. They remind them what they did. But we have not done the same to the British. They raped us economically. They raped us politically, but we haven't even got an apology out of them for the Jallianwala massacre on April 13, 1919. We haven't got a single apology from the British on the Bengal famines in the 20th century and in the 18th century, in which millions died. We haven't got a single paisa for reparation for what they did to this country. So while Japan has apologized to China for the war crimes, rape of Nanjing, comfort women, there has been no apology from the British or the British Empire. Fact of the matter is that there was, since 19th century, there was regulated prostitution, or what is called chaklas, around the British cantonments. What about them? Weren't they comfort women? Have we said anything about them? Have we said anything about Jallianwala massacre? Have they apologized for it? Have they apologized for the famine? No. So it is very important for us to really decolonize our mindset. And that should start with the government itself first.
Okay.
The Indian Armed Forces, for instance, it talks about, if you talk to Indian Army General, he will talk about Naam Namak Nishan. Now this Naam Namak Nishan is actually a colonial thing, right? Name was your caste. Namak was the CO who used to distribute salaries in cash. Nishan was the regiment. Where was the country in it? But they still keep on harping that same thing. Similarly, if you look at the Indian regiments, they're still based on castes. They're not the 39th regiment or the 40th regiment or the Bengal cavalry of earlier in the past. So what they did was they actually they tried to divide you on caste basis. And you still haven't been able to rectify that. Even the Indian bureaucracy is just a sort of, appendage of the British bureaucracy. And is as slow as anything. So it is important for India to really, really decolonize itself if it starts to grow. And that can only happen if you think originally. If you're going to follow everything, then the battle is already lost. You see, Mahmud of Ghazni, when he raided Somnath, the simple fact remains is that he had better horses, which now translates in technology. I mean, these horses, the Khorasani horses, they were better. They would go for long distances at a higher speed and with limited amount of food, which was available. While India does not have horses. Similarly, if you look at the Mongols, how did they win? Because they actually invented the stirrup. So you could stand on the stirrup and shoot. with the same horses. So it's all about technologies, stirrups, gunpowder, then you come into ammunition and so on and so forth. Today, whosoever has the technology is the person the country which will grow. And that is what we need to fix on. And that is why we need to have a strong, independent mindset. Even the terms that we use in defining strategy, they're all inventions or all sort of articulations or orchestrations of the Anglo-Saxon West. So we have to think originally. We have to have, strategy which is based in India rather than strategy which is sort of, based for the other people. We talk about air-land battle. Again, it's a World War II concept. If India has to grow, it has to come out of that. And India must remind its enemy and its adversaries in the past as to what did they do. But somehow we have not, we've taken a very, we hardly have said anything to them. It's not about getting the Kohinoor diamond back. It is what you did to us. And for that, you must apologize. That's why it is very important. This actually is the main thing that Indians need to learn. And at least the young Indians who are coming in. You just sort of, blindly aping the West is not going to take you anywhere. So you have a 5,000-year-old civilization, you have our own culture, you have our own languages, you have everything, you have diversity, everything is there. And it was all there. So you have to go back into your past, be proud of it, and then come out of it, rather than sort of simply following the line of a slave.
So speaking of thinking originally, speaking of thinking independently, speaking of the need for that brings us to our next buzzword, which is Atmanirbharta.
See, Atmanirbharta is a very important concept. It is the fundamental foundation for making India into a military-industrial complex. It is for making India which actually missed the industrial revolution. It is for making India into, competing with the current powers that there be. And for that, the military-industrial complex must be developed in India. Indian private sector must be allowed to participate with the government, and whosoever is the best should come up with that. The unfortunate part about it is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has gone blue in his face trying to talk about Atmanirbharta. But let me tell you, Aisha, I don't think the message has percolated down. People in the government are still so afraid to talk to the private sector, as if the private sector is out to sort of, bribe them or sort of take something away from them, which is theirs. You cannot have Atmanirbharta unless you involve the private sector. A lot of steps have been taken, particularly by the Defense Ministry. For instance, like, the AMCA program has been made open to the private sector. The missile program has been made open to the private sector. The aircraft programs have been made into private sector. But let me tell you, the bureaucratic mindset is such that they think that private sector is out to loot, while they are the custodians of whatever India is. Fact remains is, if the private sector is corrupt, so is the Indian bureaucracy.
So now, speaking of the private sector, speaking about trade and everything else that will also help make India Atmanirbharta, one of the keywords that we've seen time and again, especially in 2025, especially with the Trump administration, is trade tariff.
Trade tariff is, the whole thing is still continuing, because I think today President Donald Trump has made a statement saying that, he'd be looking towards India for more tariff in case we don't buy because of the Russian oil. What is happening is that somewhere around December 15th, the US Treasury Secretary called up, I'm told, the Finance Minister of India, Nirmala Sitharaman, and said that, what about Russian oil? So I'm told that the Finance Minister said that, we're trying to buy less of Russian oil. But here the message was that you have to bring it down to zero. Curt, clear, bring it down to zero. Now, if India stops buying oil from Russia, Venezuelan oil is under US control now, right? Iran is under sanctions, right? So the only way India can buy is buy in Middle East, which means the prices will shoot up. The global prices will shoot up, which means not only India will suffer, the global south will suffer, which means that the whole idea is to somehow sort of, disrupt the Indian economy. I don't think so. That's a great idea. This whole business of, every now and then saying, I threaten tariffs to stop the Indo-Pak war. I threaten tariffs to do this. I threaten tariffs to do that. Now, there is a limit to which, India can also sort of, take and say that, okay, if you want to do tariffs, go ahead and do tariffs. But the fact remains is that the Indian people cannot suffer because there is no other way around in this. Unless you say, okay, you're going to provide for oils at the same rate as the Russians are doing. So basically what is happening is, if we are talking in the Indian context, this business of trade tariff is actually being used as a huge pressure point against India, against the Narendra Modi government, without realizing that India has very few options left in that, right? And so there is a limit to which, India can also sort of, take. We are trying to reduce import from Russia. It's not that we are not trying. We are trying to do that. But every now and then, if you're going to threaten India, as if, you're threatening Burkina Faso, I don't think so that works. So seriously, you look at our relationship right now, Indo-US relationship, the relationship virtually is at a pause because of the trade tariff. Because it is not President Donald Trump, it is Scott Bessent, it is the USTR, everybody is talking about it. And you think if India does not buy oil from Russia, the Ukraine war is going to stop? I don't think so. You tried your level best on that. It is for President Zelensky to convince his own people that he actually has given up on the eastern part of Ukraine, the Donbas region, because Russia is not walking out of that place. And then you try and, while you're talking about having a peace agreement with Russia, you actually target President Putin himself through a drone attack. So, fact of the matter is that, this trade tariff thing is going to continue. India is keeping quiet. But India will definitely protect its own interests, come what may. And ultimately, what you're looking at is, again, a very unstable world, as we've talked in the past. You never know when does Iran implode. You do not know how bad it's going to go in Venezuela. You don't know what is going to come out of it. And in a nutshell, these buzzwords of 2025, I think they will remain in 2026 also.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us and giving us all of this crucial perspective. But with that, it's a wrap. Do stay tuned to Hindustan Times and stay tuned for next week's episode of Point Blank.